In 80 Days, adventurer and award-winning filmmaker Paul G. Roberts retraces the global footsteps of Phileas Fogg, hero of Jules Verne's most famous work.
I'm here in Trafalgar Square, and I'm here because it's something very special, something very significant for London. And I don't mean the statue of Nelson. Actually a statue of Charles I, and it's set apart in the south side of the square on a particularly lonely island. And it is said that is the epicenter of the city of London. The same Londinium that was settled by the Romans as the very first inhabited enclave. And it's from here, like concentric circles of an onion, the city of London spans out. And now I'm going to give you a list of some of my favourite attractions for a visitor to come to London for the first time. And being based in the centre at Trafalgar Square is a great place to start. So my first tip would be to orient yourself. And London's hop-on, hop-off bus, those red double-deckers, are not just a means of transportation, they're also one of the most popular ways to get a fast idea of what the attractions are and get a sense of the city, the layout, so you know where everything is. You can then go back, visit under your own steam. Now the top deck will not work if it's raining. And you know, in London that happens quite a lot. And if you're anything like me, I'm like 194 centimetres, I'm tall, the space in the seats is really quite a snug fit, I might say torturous. And you will probably feel rather dorky like I do whenever I've gotten on these things, but they're actually quite good. And they're practical. You can get on and get off whenever you want. And while there are very different options tourists can choose from, the original visits over 80 landmarks, stopping at places, you know, the usual suspects like Buckingham Palace, the London Eye, Tower of London, Piccadilly Circus, you know what they are. I mean, you haven't experienced London unless you've mastered the London subway, the underground, or what the locals call the tube. And for a view that encapsulates the entire essence of this metropolis, there's probably no better spot than to park yourself on one of the little carriages in the infamous London Eye. One of the largest Ferris wheels in the world that reaches dizzying heights of 135 metres. One trip around takes 30 minutes. Lines can get long, so tourists are advised to book online in advance. Romantics, take note. There are special proposal packages available to those who pop the question, and you'll find the iconic London Eye smack bang in the middle of South Bank, just across the River Thames from Big Ben and Westminster Abbey. The grand monument and statue at the front of Buckingham Palace is the Queen Victoria Memorial. There's no way you're going to forget that old Grand Dame. Love it or hate it, embroiled in so much drama and controversy of late, think Andy and Epstein, Harry and Meghan, their Netflix series, the recent commemorative service for Queen Elizabeth, who and who isn't going to get invited to King Charles's coronation. The drama goes on and on. It's hard to know how the firm, as it's known, can survive with all this stuff going on. It must be hanging on by their fingernails. Love them or hate them, as I said, the monarchy is still a huge draw and a key part of the appeal of London. It's unique. Buckingham Palace is the most famous and most visited attraction in all of London, home to the reigning monarch of the UK. The elegant palace attracts hundreds of thousands of tourists each and every day. It was designed by John Nash. The spectacular palace has been enlarged and altered numerous times since its construction in 1703, and now spans over 39 acres with 775 rooms. You wonder who in their right mind needs a home with 775 rooms. The largest private garden in London, and no less than 52 royal and guest bedrooms, all decked out in pure elegance, of course. As postcard worthy as they come, the Tower Bridge is one of the most beloved and most iconic landmarks in all of London. The bridge, which crosses the River Thames and is often called London Bridge, was built between 1886 and 1894 and stands tall as a true feat of incredible Victorian-era engineering. Considered to be one of the most photographed bridges in the world, it's undoubtedly one of the most essential things to do and see in London. And rather than just walking across it, a popular new activity is the upper levels glass walkway, where tourists can find some of the best ever river views in the area. One of the most imposing sights in London is that of the Tower of London, which sits alongside the bridge. Check out Henry VIII's enormous suit of armour and be dazzled by the crown jewels and discover where poor Anne Boleyn lost her head. The world-famous castle boasts quite the decadent history, serving as a prison, a royal palace, an armoury, a public record office over the years, and now, of course, it's home to the illustrious crown jewels. The Yeoman Warders, or Beefeaters as they popularly go by, are situated outside the tower itself, with lucky tourists able to see the changing of the guard every 2 hours. An enchanting selection of exhibitions and displays await inside, but these are the most famous attractions is undoubtedly the crown jewels. These include some of the world's largest diamonds, sapphires, rubies, including the Black Prince's ruby, as well as the coronation regalia, all fit as you might expect for a king or queen. Just a stone's throw from Westminster Abbey, the Houses of Parliament is also a must for any tourist visiting London. Eager to learn more about the nation's political history and at the same time admire some brilliant classical architecture. Walk the halls where Winston Churchill and Henry VIII once walked. Check out the Commons Chamber and the Lords Chamber. Learn a little of the ins and outs of British Empire and enjoy a spot of afternoon tea in the stunning 900-year-old Palace of Westminster. Art is big business in London, and in addition to the people actually viewing it, it's also big business for galleries, collectors and auction houses who work in the business of buying and selling it. The Market 2022, according to the 6th edition of the Art Basel Market Report, rated the UK as third in the world hierarchy with an annual $65 billion turnover market. Now, London has a great variety of world-class museums and galleries, and many of the galleries have free admission, although you are lent on heavily to kick in some money for donations. London has the National Gallery, the National Portrait Gallery, the Tate Gallery, the Tate Modern, and they're all free. And there are special exhibitions often at these venues which do have admission charges. But the big free galleries, if you want to put them on your list, are the National Gallery, National Portrait Gallery, and the Tate Modern, that attract the generalist tourist who wouldn't usually be in their business of buying art. You'll find the National Gallery in Trafalgar Square, and it's one of the best, and it's home to over 2,300 priceless paintings, masterpieces. It's an absolute must, with an astonishing collection spanning the Impressionistic era to the Renaissance and everything in between. It's easy for hours to fly within these walls. You'll find names like Da Vinci, Rembrandt, Van Gogh, as well as a range of contemporary pieces from both international and British artists. Several temporary exhibitions rotate through the calendar. And since its opening way back in the 19th century, this highly esteemed National History Museum has been entertaining locals and tourists alike with its array of fascinating exhibits. Gaze in awe at the huge dinosaur remains. Learn about glistening gemstones. See the volcanic casts of people from Pompeii and much more. With some 8 million exhibits across 4 zones, seeing everything is a near impossible feat. Instead, consider an expert-led highlights package that ticks off essential displays like the various dinosaurs, Guy the gorilla, Hans Stein's nautilus shell, the great auk, and the Barbary lion skull, to name a few. And the building is pretty impressive as well. Chock full of thought-provoking artwork from the likes of Andy Warhol, Pablo Picasso, Salvador Dali, Claude Monet, and that's just a few. The Tate Modern is one of the best contemporary art museums in all of Europe. Rotating exhibitions cover a wide range of mediums, from painting and sculpture to photography and installation, making it impossible to get bored here. And what's more, entry to the museum is free. However, you will need to purchase tickets for special exhibitions. With just under 7 million viewers annually, the British Museum is the most visited museum in the United Kingdom, and the 5th most visited museum in the world, competing with the likes of the Louvre in Paris. The British Museum is close to Russell Square in the Bloomsbury area of central London. One for the culture vultures, the British Museum is an awe-inspiring attraction that should be at the top of any rainy day
in London itinerary, housing over 8 million artefacts, ancient historical curiosities from across the globe. Spanning 2 million years of history, it's one of the largest museums in the world and covers an impressive array of topics, from Roman Britain, Egyptian mummies to the history of the UK, ancient Greece, and a range of contemporary exhibitions, both permanent and rotating. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert personally established this museum. Their eclectically displayed art collection spans 2,000 years of history, from medieval armour to statues of Rodin, paintings by Van Gogh and Monet, and galleries upon furniture, fashion, ceramics, textiles, and more, not to mention over 2,000 miniatures. The Royal Victoria and Albert Museum is an embarrassment of riches. Well, musical theatre is your thing. The highlight of the trip is seeing the West End show. From Hamilton to The Lion King, Les Miserables to Matilda, there's something for everyone. Now, whether you're old or young, a Ravenclaw, a Gryffindor, Hufflepuff or a Slytherin, spending a day exploring the wizarding world of Harry Potter is one of the most sought after things to do in London today. A favourite for voyaging families, this is the ultimate Harry Potter experience, where you can immerse yourself in the world created by J.K. Rowling. At nearby Warner Brothers Studios, you can come face to face with some of the magical creatures from the films. Step inside Hogwarts Castle and explore iconic sets like Diagon Alley, Platform 9 3/4, and for those looking to add a touch of magic to their vacation, there's also a studio tour where you can learn about the filmmaking process from start to finish. Abbey Road Zebra Crossing was made famous by the 1969 Beatles album of the same name. And London has been a hub for rock music ever since the Beatles became famous. A music-themed tour should sit high atop your bucket list, led by expert music aficionados. Guided walking tours will escort you around town to see places that the rock stars made famous, from Abbey Road to locales where Jimi Hendrix lived, and venues that legends such as David Bowie played at. All combined, it's an ultimate experience for rock and roll fans. One of the things London does best is shopping, and their retail scene is next level, one of the most exciting on the planet. And when I was there recently, it was pumping. From department stores such as Selfridges, Harvey Nicks and Harrods, to the high street emporiums of Oxford Street and designer boutiques of Bond Street and Knightsbridge, there's literally something here for every style and budget. Now I want to talk to you about the politics of breakfast. Now the current debates about breakfast are nothing new. The morning meal has long been a source of medical confusion, moral frustration, and even political anxiety. There's a lot of schools of thought about what should be breakfast, and it varies depending on which country you're in and which kind of lifestyle you have. Is it croissant with a coffee? Cappuccino with a cornetto? Or maybe in LA, it's a fruit salad with some low-fat, non-dairy yogurt. Fruits and breakfast. If you're an American in the Midwest, it's probably going to be cereal and coffee. But if you're in London, like I am, it's going to be the full English, the full Monty, if you know what I mean. And a full English means eggs, baked beans, tomato, hash browns, bacon, sausage. It could mean cold meats, salads, even instant pancakes. All of the above. And you can lay it out like it's a 10-course meal, or you can hit it on the go. But nowhere like England
do they take their full English breakfast so seriously? The tradition of the full English breakfast actually dates back to the Middle Ages in the UK. At this time there are only usually 2 meals of the day, a morning meal and an evening meal. Breakfast was usually served mid to late morning and consisted of just ale and bread, perhaps with some cheese, cold meat or dripping. By Georgian and Victorian times, breakfast had become an important part of a pre-shooting match ritual. And this was the time of the landed gentry, the rich country folk in their manor houses, who would actually go out for fox hunts and shoots, to shoot wild boar and deer, and I guess not everybody did that, so it was a fairly refined and exclusive practice. The gentry loved to entertain lavishly, and that included their breakfasts. With the emergence of the Victorian era a little later, a wealthy middle class started to emerge as merchants and manufacturers and industrialists became wealthy, and they wanted to emulate the same fancy lifestyles as the landed gentry. It was also enjoyed by many in the working classes, as the punishing routine of working in factories and smelting plants often required they needed some decent sustenance before undertaking some extreme physical labour for what could be 10, 12, 14 hours a day. In today's health-conscious world, you may have thought that an English breakfast or a full English breakfast was not necessarily the healthiest way to start the day. But some experts maintain that a meal in the morning boosts the metabolism and needn't be so unhealthy, especially if the food is grilled rather than fried. The reason why the full English breakfast remains so popular even today in London, the UK and around the Great British Empire is not only that it tastes good, but it's simply because it has been enjoyed for centuries by people from all walks of life, and it has become the UK and London's signature defining meal.
Unlike much of continental Europe, beer has played the leading role to wine and other libations, especially in the London pub. And more than in any other culture that I've encountered, the English pub, which is short for public house, occupies a special and intrinsic aspect of social culture here. Beer has run through the body of London for generations. In medieval times, fermented brews were seen as a safer alternative to drinking the water. They also had supposed medicinal properties. In London, a new brew must be tested in the same way that they were in the 1300s, by the City of London, and the position of beer tester carried huge prestige when beer was more regulated than water, and they earned the equivalent of 6-figure salaries.
And here we are in the back of a cab with a very charming London taxi driver in the front.
Hi now.
What's your name, Gov?
Michael.
Michael. My name's Paul.
Nice to meet you, Paul.
You too, buddy.
Welcome to London.
Thank you. I was doing a bit of research, and apparently there's no other place in the world that that enshrines the pint in Europe like London.
Right, yeah?
The whole pub culture. Well, you know, Europe, Spain, and Italy, and France are all about the vino.
They've not got the culture. They have in Holland, to be fair.
That's true.
In Holland, very much so. It's a great little pubs, but yeah, you're right. I mean, the London pubs is there's so many.
Well, you know, in Germany during the war, they used to give people food stamps, and they considered beer like bread. It was like a foodstuff.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't know if it's true, but I guess you get some sort of sustenance from it.
We'll take that as the truth.
And it's made out of the same sort of shit, so.
Yeah.
But those Germans are weird.
You said that.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't get many arguments in the UK.
For partygoers and social butterflies, a lively pub crawl is one of the best things you can do in London. On top of the chance to spend a night out on the town, visiting all the most happening places like the Tiger nightclub or a handful of hidden speakeasies, it's also a great way for tourists to sit, drink and mingle with the locals.
My tailor, Savile Row.
The famous Savile Row. It's actually where the great Alexander McQueen learned his tailoring craft. And this is the place where a man can still get kitted out as a gentleman in handmade suits and handmade shirts, in a style that hasn't changed in 400 years. Savile Row, no other name or destination in the modern world, has had such a direct influence on bespoke suiting. The ateliers that line Savile Row are unmatched in reputation. Moreover, the dandy, the man who prizes personal cleanliness and strictness of dress, is historically entrenched into the international interpretations of British culture, complete with top hat, cane, and the prized three-piece dinner suit. Ironically, it was Bronx-born Ralph Lauren who probably benefited the most from Savile Row and the appropriation of the English gentleman Beau Brummel dandy and Savile Row style suiting. Ralph unashamedly took what they had and then sold it back to the British along with the rest of the world. Ralph was an unapologetic cultural appropriator. Earlier, he lifted his brand name and the iconic shirt from the sport of polo. He also plundered Native American designs with his Navajo shawls and coats. And he definitely dipped deep into the world of Savile Row bespoke suiting for his tailoring suiting business. But Ralph changed the game with his marketing. And that's something I know a little about, as my agency, Desire, launched his business Polo in Australia many, many decades ago. And we did all the marketing and advertising for him for that business for over a decade. So I'm quite knowledgeable about the Ralph Lauren business model. The British dandy may be a stereotype, but the merchants and tailors of Savile Row continue to work tirelessly in their pursuit of suiting perfection, and to this day the street retains near mythical renown. Stretching from Vigo Street at its south end and Conduit Street to the north, the Row traces its heritage back to the late 17th century, when the first Earl of Burlington, Richard Boyle, purchased a large mansion on nearby Piccadilly. As the influential aristocrats were prone to do at the time, Boyle also purchased the surrounding land in order to secure his privacy and safety. The land was later developed by one of Boyle's hereditary successors, who leased the various properties to other members of the aristocracy as London throttled towards its eventual position as one of the most influential cities in the world. The true Savile Row was born when handmade bespoke suiting consisted of the finest materials was the norm. Although such a high standard is not actively maintained anywhere else in the world today, Savile Row shop owners recall the rich roots of its history in order to guarantee suits adhere to a strict level of excellence. Their transition into the 20th century saw the birth of the modern suit, as well as Savile Row's slow but sure transition from mostly residential buildings to mostly retail buildings. And Savile Row has had more than the odd splash in Hollywood. Nod to James Bond, and more recently, Kingsman.